For this one, I'm going to use a stencil to make a wreath. So I'm going to use a smaller bowl this time, make a little bit smaller complete wreath instead of just the edge. So again, just lightly getting an idea of where that's going to go. Actually a little darker than I like. I mean, I want to be able to see where I'm going, but I don't want any of it to show very pronounced after I'm done. So I have these Martha Stewart cling stencils, and I'm going to try and use a couple different ones. The verse I'm doing here is Deuteronomy 24, and it says, "For the Lord your God is he who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to give you the victory." So I'm going to be covering up words here, and literally I'm looking at the line, and since all these flowers have a little bit of a curve to them, I'm just going to line up the stems a little bit on the curve of my template line. You could do gel crayon with this on a sponge. I'm just using my Prismacolor pencils just to kind of outline and then color in. And I'm doing a really simple fill in just to start. And then I may come in and shade over. I'm going to use more than just this one stencil, so I'm just going to have you watch me color, and I'll speed it up so it doesn't take so long, just so you get an idea of how I'm laying the stencils down around the edge. The nice thing about these stencils is that they cling, and when you get done, if they lose their stickiness, you just wash them, let them air dry, and then they're sticky again. So you can see I'm about halfway around. The nice thing about using the pencils, one, I can get the detail in there, the color blending, and I also don't have to use the entire stencil. As you can see here, I was just using little pieces of it to create a little bit different design so that it's not the same exact pattern just right in a row. And same thing here, where I used a portion of the flower stem and kind of incorporated it into the circle. Keep the stems either poking into your line or in line with your line so that they look like it would be a natural curve to be coming off of that line. And you can do that to either side. So I really could keep adding either way. An advantage possibly of using a not clinging stencil would be that you could flip it over. I imagine I could try to flip this over and use it with the sticky side up. Maybe I'll try one just to see. So while it's not clinging, and it's such a soft material that these stencils are made out of that it just wants to bend, so I have to be really careful not to push on the edges and just use them as a guideline and really not push against them. I think a stiffer stencil, like a hard plastic stencil, would easily flip and you could just hold it in place and use it. This is hard. Harder than the other way anyway. And my pencils are not very sharp. I need to sharpen them again, but the Prismacolor pencils have a special sharpener that's supposed to be easier on the pencils, because if you use them in like an electric sharpener, they will grind down really quickly. And I don't have the special Prismacolor sharpener, so I just sharpen them by hand, and so that takes some time, and I try to be careful not to break them off. And I try not to sharpen them too often so that they'll last. But it would help to have them sharp now because they would be getting into the corners a little easier. So I'm going to try something with this one. Do you see how this stamp is made up into these 6 little sections? So I think I'm going to do one little section at a time, but instead of doing it in a circle, I'll keep moving it, and I probably will only color in half the stem and then do the rest just by eye, and it won't have as tight of a curve. And I'm just completing the stems. So this does most of the work for you, and then you can kind of fill it in as you want to keep it going around the same curve as the original circle rather than this tighter curve that's on this circle on the stencil. And you could do these solid if you wanted. You wouldn't have to do 2 colors in them. I just think it kind of adds a little dimension so that they don't look quite so flat on the page. And the Prismacolor pencils blend really nicely. Regular color pencils have a little less wax in them, and it's the wax content that creates that nice blending capability. My Prismacolor pencils are really old. They're from my high school, college days. I've taken pretty good care of them. They've held up really well. Oops, I forgot the dot in the middle. I've heard that some of the newer ones are not as good a quality, but it just depends on who you talk to. Some people say they get a set and they're when they sharpen them, they just break all the time. Like the actual waxy piece in the middle is broken up inside the wood. And I've heard you can put them in a low temperature oven, which will melt the wax inside the wood again and help it to reform solid. But when you're paying this much for a set of pencils, you really want them to be in good shape when you get them. So I hope people who are getting them more recently are having better luck with them. You have to be careful out here on the edge so that you don't rip your page. I don't know why it looks funny to me without the middle dot, so I'm adding it. When I was teaching the watercolor flowers, I talked about how a lot of times we'll do things in uneven numbers. A lot of nature is very symmetrical, but then in art it seems to balance better if you have odd numbers. So like there's 3 here, 3 here. You know, I might put one more in here. So I've been showing you wreaths with a circle form using a bowl, and even if I'm not doing the complete circle, I'm still using part of that as a form. I thought I would try and do something more oval for this page just to show you something different, and I don't have anything that shape, so I'm just going to try and free form it real quickly here. So if I was feeling nervous at all about just freehanding that, I could have found an oval online and printed it out to the size that I needed, cut it out, and traced around it. For this wreath, I'm going to use some floral doodles or flower doodles, and I literally just went on Pinterest and typed in floral or flower doodles and what I came up with immediately was this. I copied the image and pasted it onto a Word document and then printed it out so that I could have something to show you as a reference. If you're feeling like I can't make up my own doodles, then go ahead, get something like this and print it out. And if this is the size you wanted, put your phone or your iPad under there, or even I can almost see through the paper if it's printed dark enough. You can trace, and I'm just going to freehand. I want the flowers a little smaller, but I'm just going to pick flowers from off this page and go around, keeping the heads of the flowers going up on both sides. I'm going to have the stems kind of following my line of the oval again. I'll just kind of branch out from there. I want to leave the space open in the middle to hand letter my text. Maybe I'll start with this one right here. There's not room for me to leave this in view of the camera, so I'm going to move it aside, but I'm going to try to use only things from this page just so you can see. And while I'm inking is when I'm going to fix any of my errors that I feel like something's not lined up correctly or I wanted it a little bit different size. I will adjust with the ink and not worry about where the original pencil was. But for the most part, I'm able to go right over those lines. It's pretty much the way I wanted it. I wanted to take a second to remind you that I try to give credit if I'm inspired by somebody else's artwork, and I will write it right on my Bible page with the verse and the date of the day that I journaled, and then I'll put inspired by, and this one would be Studio Denmark because they're the designer of this pattern, and this is for sale on the internet, but you have to pay for them if you're going to use them on something for your business or something that you're going to sell. The thing about our Bibles is as long as you're not selling your artwork from your Bible and passing it off as your own, then you're not infringing on copyrights. But I do still try and give respect to the company or the artist who originally published the idea. I just feel like that's honest. I really hope that people are inspired by any work that I post, and I've had people copy what I've done, and that's totally fine with me. I do see why it's so important to at least give mention to who inspired you for something, even if it just kind of looks like theirs, or you followed a sort of a pattern that they used to get your design, or you traced it. It just feels good to have somebody respect the work you've done, and so I try to pass that along for anybody who inspires me. So these are my little doodle flowers. I like them a lot, and I wanted to show you too the page that I did at the Bible journaling workshop. I actually did this on a piece of the deli paper so that I could cut it out and use it on another page of my Bible if I wanted to. And if I was going to color this in watercolor markers, I would definitely do it on a piece of the deli paper so that the watercolor markers don't bleed through my page, and then I would glue it down on the page, and I would just really cut closely around, not right on. Obviously it's a tiny little line. Nobody's gonna fussy cut that close to the line, or you'll have little bits and pieces falling everywhere. So I would just cut around this loosely, with maybe leaving like a 1/16 inch margin all the way around it. And then I would try and use my art eraser, which is kneadable, and I would use that to dab on here and get as much of the graphite off as I could before I started coloring with the watercolor pencils, so that if I decide to use a lighter color, you won't see the pencil through it still, or you'll see it less. So I hope you enjoyed this little portion. I'm going to go ahead and finish doing my scripture, and then I'll post a picture at the end of the video of the final page. Here's the final page with the hand lettering. I had to turn it sideways in order for the video to show the entire page. I also wanted to show you, I redrew the mirror image of the picture that I had done on the deli paper and painted it with watercolor.